Welcome to In Her Voice. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am passionate about helping women live authentically by listening to their inner voice. Get ready to be inspired by women of all walks of life that have set aside their should-bes and not good enoughs and are standing in their true voice, the voice of wisdom that each and every one of us has inside. Hello everyone, this is Kelly and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for taking your time to come put me in your ears, to be with me, really, because when you listen to this, I feel like you are being with me, if that makes any sense. Like sit down, grab a cup of coffee, let's chat for a little bit about these really important things that we need to chat about, right? Today I have an amazing guest on. Dallas Woodburn is here to talk about how to write your book. And I had her come on the podcast, obviously because I'm writing my book right now, but also because I think that even if you're not writing a book, let me just say this, even if you're not writing a book, there's so much about writing a book, about the journey of that can be translated to any big thing that you're doing. And so if you think, oh, well, I'm not writing a book, I shouldn't listen to this, I just want you to pause that thought and insert, instead of writing a book, whatever is the thing that you really want to do, because you will learn so much from this interview and it's so exciting. I also want to encourage all of you who are listening, two things. First of all, someone asked me the other day, how many people listen to your podcast? And I was like, a lot. A lot of people listen to my podcast, like thousands of people. Isn't that amazing? And I hear from very few of them. And so sometimes I wonder, well, are they actually listening? Are people actually listening? I mean, I see a download number, but that doesn't tell me who you are. That doesn't tell me what you're learning from this podcast or why you come back week after week or what you love about it. And so that's what I want to know. If you are listening to this podcast, let me know. Let me know why you listen. Let me know who you are and who you are becoming. Those are the things that I want to know about everyone who listens to this podcast. And you can do that by shooting me an email at kelly@kellycovert.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at kellyjcovert. Those are all great ways to let me know that you're actually listening, that you are more than just a number, because I believe that you are more than just a number. The other thing that I want to let you guys know is that if you listen to this podcast and you aren't yet on my newsletter, I would encourage you to sign up for the newsletter, because I have some new things, exciting things that I am rolling out this fall. I'm really excited to share these with you, and I want to make sure that you know about them. And the best way to know about them is to be on my email list. So if you haven't signed up yet, go do that. Right now you can press pause, go do it at kellycovert.com/newsletter, or you can click the handy link that's right in the podcast description on your podcast app that you are using. So, I encourage you to do that. I can't wait to share this exciting stuff that's coming up with you. And now let's get to the podcast. Well, we're in the podcast. I realize that. Now let's get to the meat. Let's get to Dallas. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Dallas Woodburn is an acclaimed writing coach and book doula who founded the 90-day book breakthrough program to help entrepreneurs give birth to the books that are burning inside of them. She is the author of 3 books, both traditionally published and indie published, and is the editor of 2 national anthologies. She also has experience as a freelance writer for dozens of magazines, newspapers, websites, and 30 plus books in the popular Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. Dallas received her BA in creative writing and entrepreneurship from the University of Southern California and her master's degree in fiction writing from Purdue University. And she was a Steinbeck Fellow at San Jose State University. She has led groups and seminars at a number of national conferences, festivals, and book fairs, and is a frequent guest speaker at club meetings, on podcasts, and on TV shows. Her new novel, The Best Week That Never Happened, will be published by Month 9 Books in 2020. So let's get right to our podcast with Dallas. Dallas Woodburn, thank you so much for being on In Her Voice with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
Oh my goodness. The pleasure is all mine for sure. And I have to say, we were talking a little bit before we got on the recording that our topic today, how to bring your book to life, how to birth your book, is sort of selfish on my part. And I think that most of my audience knows I've been dedicated to sitting down in my chair in my studio and writing every single day. And I've been doing it pretty much minus 2 days for the past 40 days. So I'm super proud of that.
That's wonderful.
And I want to start with this question, because it's a question that I have asked myself. It's a question that I know other people ask all the time. But why is it so darn hard just to get started when you know you have a book inside of you?
That is a great question. I wish that there was just some sort of magic pill we could take to get started, because I do think that is something that so many people struggle with. And I guess personally, I feel that we have so many ideas, a lot of us, that are swirling around inside of our heads, that it can feel overwhelming to even know where to begin. And I think something like a book in particular feels so weighty and huge that we know how many pages we have to write, and it feels almost impossible to think of doing that. And so I think starting that first page can feel like you have this big weight on your shoulders, knowing how far you still have to go. But I heard a wonderful quote the other day, and it was that it is impossible to write a book, but it is possible to write a single page. And so I think maybe if you are starting and you're feeling like it's really hard to get started, maybe don't even think about the project as a whole. Just try to think about, can you sit down for 15 minutes and write a paragraph? And don't think about all of the things you want to share in your book. Just think about maybe one story or one small message that you want to share and write that down.
I love that. And it's so funny because that is basically what I've been doing. I've given myself permission to let go of all of the logistics of writing a book, if that makes sense, and just sit down and write. Because I would get so caught up in thinking, well, how am I going to publish it, and who's going to buy it, and do I need an agent, and do I need to have a book proposal? And I would get so far ahead of myself, and I literally hadn't even written a word.
Yes.
And I finally just had to let it go. And it does pop up, as I'm sitting down in my chair, I get caught up in thinking, oh, this doesn't feel good. And I don't know what I'm doing. And then I just remind myself, this time that you've given yourself right now is just about putting words on a page. And I'm curious because I know you've written several books. Do you remember when you first began your first book? I would love to hear that story.
Yeah, I actually, I've been writing for as long as I can remember. And I feel like I had a little bit of just that I was very fortunate that my dad is actually a writer. So, like many kids, I loved reading. And I think because my dad is a writer and he would often write from home, I was always really aware that the books I was reading, that they didn't just magically appear on the shelves at the library, that there was actually someone who wrote them, and that was something that you could do. So I think maybe for some people that link doesn't happen for a while. But for me, since I lived with a writer and I saw him writing, he would often write at the kitchen table. And so I was just always really aware, and I always thought that, oh, that's something that I could do. So I do remember the first little story that I wrote when I was in elementary school, and I wrote it out in a journal. And then my dad let me type it on his. He actually had a typewriter,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember just how exciting that was. And it just felt so special to get those words on that page. And I think that all of us still have those little kids inside of us. I mean, if you can try to think back to when you were first learning how to write the letters of the alphabet, and it just was, you felt so proud to be able to write your name and to communicate in that way. And I do some teaching with children as well. And often in early elementary school, they are so proud of what they write. It's almost like those critical voices haven't come in yet. And maybe those, like you were saying, logistical voices of, well, what am I going to do with this? Who's going to read this? And am I going to be able to sell this? Like those voices haven't come in. And I think all of us still have that buried deep inside of us. And just being able to like tap into that again and kind of just remember how it's pretty magical if you think about it. Like for the English language, we have 26 letters in our alphabet, and that you are able to express anything that you want to express to someone else that perhaps you have never met and will never meet in your life can read those words that you write, and it can totally change their life or their perspective or have them think of a new thing, or it can comfort them in a time in their life when they're really needing comfort. And it just, that whole process, I feel like it has so much magic in it. And sometimes it's really easy to sort of lose track of that. So I try to center myself and kind of tap into that every time I sit down to write, but especially every time I begin a new project as my adult self, trying to remember what it was like being that little girl.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any special practices that you do to help you tap into that childlike place?
Yeah, I actually do. I have a photograph of myself as a little girl writing on my dad's typewriter. So that is on my desk as a nice reminder. And then yeah, I mean, I always try to approach my writing as actually is kind of like a self-care ritual that I have. So like you were saying about just trying to go with the flow and let go of all of those outer expectations. So I have a favorite tea that I will make before I start writing. Sometimes I'll light a candle. I actually have a playlist. I create a different music playlist for each project that I'm working on, and I only listen to that when I'm writing that particular project. So it kind of trains my brain when I hear that first song, like, okay, we're getting into this special writing time. Even something as simple as, turning off my phone and putting it in the other room and shutting down my email. I like to write on the computer. Some people I know like to write in journals. I think either way is great. But if you are writing on the computer, really clearing away all of those other distractions. So it's just you and that blank page, and treating it as like a special time that you have with yourself. I think that in popular culture, when writers are portrayed, it is often this, struggle. They're pulling out their hair. It's almost like this. You have to wrestle these ideas out of yourself, and I just don't think it needs to be that way. I think it doesn't have to be this painful process. I think it can be something that actually feels joyful to you and that can be really, really nourishing.
Nourishing. That's such a good word, because I think that sometimes people think of sitting down to write as being a draining thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the opposite of that. So I love that you mentioned writing in a journal, because what I'm discovering about me, and my listeners know I love journaling. It's a huge part of my daily practice and my self-care practice and how I connect with my own inner voice. But I really had to separate for myself the difference between journaling and writing. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think when I think of journaling, I love journaling too. And for me, it's really personal and private, and it's a place for me um, just to be very, very, I don't want to say dramatic, but to just really dig into those emotions that I'm feeling on the page in a way that I don't want anyone else to see, though, that it's just for me. As opposed to when I'm writing a book project or an article or an essay, I think it's important to have an idea in your mind of who you are writing this for. And that isn't to say that you are concerned about, publishing and marketing and what a reader's going to say, but it's more thinking about how what you are writing will help someone else, how someone else will be able to learn or grow or find comfort or find a connection in what you're writing. And something that an exercise that I do with my clients is we write something called our manifesto for our project. And so before we even start the process of writing, I have them think about their ideal reader in their mind. And I think sometimes it can be overwhelming as well when we think about writing a book to this kind of blank sea of faces, like to everyone. But if you can think of just one particular person, and it might be someone that you've worked with before, even a friend or family member who you would just love to read your book and who you think your work will really resonate with, trying to sort of write to that person, I think can be really helpful with feeling the connection that your words have with the reader. And I find this especially helpful when you get to what I call the muddy middle of a project, where your initial enthusiasm and excitement has maybe worn off a little bit, but you feel like you still are a little bit far from that end goal. It's a really common place for people to quit in that middle zone. And so having that manifesto where you think about, what do I really want to say to my ideal reader, and reminding yourself about that ideal reader, I think can really motivate people to keep going. So you're writing this book for yourself, yes, but I think unlike journaling, which for me, I journal purely for myself, when I'm writing a book or another project that I plan to share with others, it's not only for me, it's also for other people that I hope to be affected by what I'm writing.
I love that. And I think having that picture of who you're writing to in your mind is so valuable, because what I'm discovering as I sit down daily is that while my desire to write the book remains high, my motivation is not always high. And a lot of that depends on my energy and the time of day and what's going on and all of the things. And so I think tapping into who you're writing it for helps keep the motivation high, even as the desire stays high.
I love how you make that distinction between desire and motivation, so that yeah, you can have this passion for this project, but that doesn't mean that you're going to feel 100% excited to write every single day. And I think sometimes people worry, oh, I don't feel super motivated to do this today. Does that mean there's something wrong with my book, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm not a true writer, or it means that, maybe my book isn't good enough? And I think just recognizing that that's a normal part of the process. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, sometimes I don't necessarily feel motivated to sit down and start, But it's similar to how I feel about exercise, I guess, that I have never regretted a writing session. Like I always feel so good about it at the end when I've written, when I read back over what I wrote that day, I just feel so satisfied. So sometimes for me, the hardest part is just those first couple minutes of like getting into the process, and then things begin to flow easier.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Like starting, it's even like when you're really tired and you're laying on the couch and you want to go to bed, it's hard to get off the couch because you have to start. I think it's the same idea. Sometimes just need to remind ourselves that the start is the hardest part. And then once we're in it, it flows and it's so much easier. So I want to talk about the critical voices. You mentioned them a couple of times, and just now you talked about it. If you're having a time where you're feeling like, oh, it's not very good, or people are not going to want to read it, and I think that among women, this critical voice, or what I like to call our inner mean girl,
Yeah.
is so strong. It's so vocal. It's so loud, and we have to work really, really hard just in general to balance that with our true wisdom, with what our inner voice says about how we are worthy right now. Even if we never write the book, we're worthy, right? Even if we never do another thing, we're worthy. But as a writer in particular, what do you find works really well for you to help with the critical voice, to help with the perfectionist that wants everything to be just so on the first draft? How do you manage that?
Yeah. This is something that, I've struggled with throughout all the writing I've done. And the more people and writers that I've talked to, I think, and like you said, especially women, I think it's so common. And I don't know what it is about writing. I feel like maybe it's trying something that can feel so challenging or being vulnerable on the page that I feel like it, in my area of writing as opposed to other areas of my life, I feel like those critical voices can come in more powerfully. So I think it's really important to have strategies to try to deal with them. And something that has worked for me is what I used to try to do was just combat those critical voices by internally talking back to them. So saying, no, this is really good, or this book is gonna, make such a difference. This is gonna be great. Or I love this sentence I just wrote. But that didn't work for me super well because sometimes, especially when I am writing a rough draft, I don't necessarily love every sentence or paragraph that I'm writing, and I'm not quite sure where it's going. And so I would say, oh no, this is great. This is great. But it almost felt like the critical voices won out over that. So something that I've learned that has actually been really helpful to me, and I think has given me a lot of grace in the process, is when I have those critical voices. Like if I have a voice say, "Oh, I don't know about what this is. Like I feel like this is silly, or this idea isn't good enough." I'll just add in my mind the little phrase, "and that's okay."
Oh, I
So
love
it's
that.
it kind of turns the conversation where it makes me feel like, and that's okay. This rough draft doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect. I'm doing this even if it's not perfect, like, and that's okay. And for me, that has just totally taken away the power of those critical voices, just that small little phrase. I mentioned I have the little picture of myself as a girl on my desk. I also have that phrase written out on my bulletin board just to remind myself that it's okay.
Oh, and that's such a good strategy whenever that voice comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, not just for writing, right? I love that the lessons that we're talking about and the tools and the strategies that we're talking about, they go beyond writing. I mean, so you guys may be thinking, well, I don't want to write a book. Well, you know what? Whatever you want to do, these are the steps that you need. These are the tools that you need to get past that critical voice, that inner mean girl, because she's going to show up. In my life experience, I have not had a time when she doesn't like to make her voice be heard. And I think it's more about expecting her to be there and knowing what to do when she shows up.
Yeah.
Having a plan in place. And that's okay is a beautiful plan. It's a beautiful tool. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope people find it helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to write it out too. I'm going to write it on a sticky note right now and put it up on my computer. I love that. So I have an interesting question for you. It's a two-parter. Here's the first part. What is for you as an established writer, as someone who's been doing this literally for their lifetime, just about, what do you find to be the hardest thing about being a writer?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I think if you would have asked me this question a few years ago, even just like 3 years ago, I would have told you all about, I think, a lot of the external things, like how it can be so hard to get published, or how, there can be so much rejection and disappointment, and you have to just keep trudging along. And all of that is true. Um, but in the past couple of years, I've really tried to focus on enjoying the journey as opposed to being focused on the end goal. And I would say that the hardest part is what we were just talking about, those critical voices and um, the self doubt. And also, I think just the fear that comes up. So for me, every time I start a new project, I feel afraid that I maybe won't be able to finish it. And I think every book that I embark upon is such a unique journey, and it challenges me in a new way. And that's really important because it means that I'm growing. Like, I don't want to just write the same book over and over again. But at the same time, that feels scary because it feels like I haven't done this exact thing before, and what if I can't do it? And I don't exactly know how I'm going to get to that other side. So I think for me, even more than all those external things, like about getting published and agents and all of that stuff we mentioned at the very beginning, I think it's more of that personal um, relationship with myself, that it's something that I'm constantly working on. And that's why I think writing is so valuable. I've had people ask me, well, why shouldn't I just get a ghostwriter to write my book? And, I tell them that because writing your book is going to change you in the best way. Like, it's this journey that you're going to take that you can't hire that out. Like, yes, someone else could write your book for you, but you're not going to have that self exploration and know yourself in the way that you would if you write the book yourself.
Oh, yeah. That is so true. I've never thought of it like that before, about how the writing itself becomes part of the self-exploration. And it's interesting because even though I haven't thought of it, what I have been discovering in my own writing is I I thought I knew what I was going to be writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I write, I'm like, oh, wow, this is different than I thought it was going to be. And there's something new here. And I'm discovering new things that I want to include. And it's really a beautiful process.
I love that. It's amazing how much wisdom we have inside of us that we don't even know.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, that's what this podcast is all
Yeah.
about, right? It's about listening to that wisdom. It's about being connected to our inner voice. And I think what better way to spur on that connection, if you will, is to write about it.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're writing about something different than that, I still think you're writing about your inner voice. Like, you have to be connected to that, I would imagine, to
Exactly.
write anything of value. Don't you think?
I 100% agree. And I think that trying to tap into your inner voice instead of trying to be someone else. So instead of, I think it's great to have other books that you admire and maybe books that you sort of see your book in conversation with, but you don't want to try to write in someone else's voice. Like, your voice has this unique energy and quality and magic to it that nobody else's voice has. Like, it still gives me goosebumps to think about this idea that yes, there might be other stories that have been told that are similar to yours. There might be other books that are similar, but no one else in the world has had the exact same experiences that you have had with the exact same perspective and voice that you have had. And so, if you don't take the time to really tap into that voice, if you don't listen to that and try to nourish that and acknowledge that your voice is going to be lost. And it's so important. It's such a gift to the rest of us in the world for you to share your voice with all of us. And so I just think that is such a wonderful part of writing, is that I know for myself, if I ever have periods where I take some time off from writing, I feel less connected to that voice inside of myself. I think that writing strengthens that and helps me listen to that voice much more clearly.
Yeah. How do you nourish your voice?
Well, by trying to write every single day is really important part of my practice. So it's part of my morning routine. And for me, reading other people's voices, especially voices that I find to be really authentic and brave and true to themselves, helps give me bravery to really, tap into my own voice and nourish my own voice. And I think, like you were saying about how these practices are so useful in life, even if you don't have dreams to write a book, like even just, surrounding myself with people who support my voice and listen to my voice. As writers, sometimes you get feedback that feels like it's not necessarily given in the most constructive or helpful way, and finding ways to tune out the feedback that you feel is not tapping into or honoring, your voice and what you are trying to share. And when I was in college, I studied writing, and I had some really wonderful professors, but I also had a few experiences where I would be in a workshop. So you're with maybe 10 or 12 other writers, and everyone is giving you feedback on what you've written. And it's kind of a strange situation where you, the writer, have to just sit there quietly and listen to everyone. You're not really allowed to explain or, give any feedback of your own. And sometimes it could be really disheartening, because I think people naturally would approach that space in a critical way. And the best people would be trying to do it in a way to help you and help you improve your writing and become better. But I had a wonderful professor who gave me the advice. She said, take in what is useful and discard the rest. And I think it's a little bit easier said than done, because our brains with that negativity bias tend to remember things that maybe are more negative or critical. But I've tried to take that into my own writing practice, and whether it's my own critical voices or feedback I've gotten from other people, like if it's something that is useful to me and that if I feel it's that they are responding to my authentic voice on the page, then yes, that is wonderful. Like we can't see our own blind spots, and it's so helpful to have other readers. But if it's feedback that I feel like is just not aligned with what I'm trying to do or aligned with who I am, just discarding that and not worrying about it, because we can't write for everybody. We have to think about those specific ideal readers that we are trying to write our message towards.
Yeah, so good. It's so, so good. Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh, I love Elizabeth Gilbert is one of my very favorites. Brene
Yes, me
Brown.
too.
I love Brene. One of my favorite fiction writers, I actually had her as a professor in college, and she's just amazing. Her name is Amy Bender, and she writes really lovely magical realism fiction. Yeah, and I also just love reading different like literary journals and short stories and things that are maybe by writers who are kind of up and coming, who haven't really like had their big break yet, but I can feel their energy and just a lot of freshness in their prose is really exciting for me.
I love that. I'll have to check out Amy Bender. I don't know if I've ever read anything by her, but I love me some Brene Brown.
Oh,
I'm excited about her new book coming out.
she's amazing. Yeah, she's definitely one of those touchstone writers for me that I'll find myself going back to when I
Yeah.
need to be a little more brave.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that you do besides writing is you are a writing coach, and you really help people. And I mean, I'm kind of putting my assumption that you help people who maybe don't think of themselves as being writers
Hmm.
to birth their book. Am I right in that?
Yes. Yes, you are
Yeah.
very right.
Because I think some people like you were born to be a writer, right? That's what your soul has called out to you since you were a little girl,
Hmm.
typing on your dad's typewriter. But for other people, I think they feel like they have a book in them, but they don't necessarily feel like they're a writer. And so, in your role as a writing coach, how do you support people?
I think of myself as being a cheerleader for writers and also as I call myself a book doula. I'm actually pregnant right now with my first baby, and I have a
Oh,
doula.
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And she's been so wonderful and supportive. And she also gives me, it's almost like this container of support that I can be in during this time of my life that is so new, and I have so many questions, and it can feel kind of scary. And so I was realizing, I feel like what I do is I'm kind of like a book doula where I help people give birth to this book inside of them. So I offer this, container of support where I'm able to cheer on each of my clients individually and help them find their own unique voice and also their own unique writing practice and what works best for them, because I do not think it is a cookie cutter process. I think that every writer is different. And so helping them find what works for them and really tapping into that, and giving them that, cheering them on and also giving them accountability. So sometimes it has to be a gentle kick in the pants to get them to be accountable to themselves and to their goals. And then finally, I think that sometimes when we are going through something, whether it is pregnancy and childbirth or running a marathon or starting a business or writing a book, we come across these fears and doubts and roadblocks, and we feel like they are unique to us. Like we look around us at other people who have accomplished what we are trying to do, and it feels like to us maybe like they didn't have any of these same fears and doubts and roadblocks, but they're so common and such a part of the process. So a lot of the times with my clients, just reassuring them that, this is what you're feeling, what you're going through is normal. Like here are some tools to work through it. It's really common in particular, I guess they should warn you about this, Kelly, that sometimes when we get to the middle of writing a book, I call it the muddy middle. I think it's the most common time for people to give up. So starting can be really, really hard. And then once you get started, I think getting to the middle, you're just still far enough away from that other shore that it's really common to have those fears and those doubts come back very, very powerfully. So when my clients get to that stage, just reassuring them that it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with their book, that it's a really normal part of the process, and here are some ways that we can work through it and, just keep going. Whereas if we weren't working together, a lot of them have told me that they would stop there,
Mm-hmm.
and their book would kind of die at that point.
Yeah. And I think it's so valuable, you guys, to ask for support when you need it. Like we don't have to do these things, starting a business, writing a book, running a marathon, all of those things that you said. We don't have to do those by ourselves. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
here for each other and we're here to support each other. And the most beautiful thing about that, I think, is when you ask for support, you're also supporting someone else in their business, in their financial source of income, in their service of what they were born to do. And it's such a beautiful system of giving and receiving when we give ourselves permission to ask for help.
Exactly. I love that. I love how you say giving ourselves permission, that we don't have to just struggle alone. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love this so much. So, you guys, if you have a book inside of you, Dallas is the woman to help you birth it. And I love that you call yourself a book doula. I like totally get that in all the respects. So, I know you're a listener of the podcast. So, my last question that I ask all of my interviewees, I guess I should say, all of my guests is, in your life right now, what is your inner voice asking of you?
Yes, and I love this question. I've been thinking about what I wanted to say, and I think my inner voice right now is most telling me to trust. So to trust in her, to trust in her wisdom, and just to really to listen to her.
Oh, I love it. What a good lesson. What a good lesson for all of us to take into heart today. Dallas, I cannot thank you enough for all of the wisdom that you have shared with us today. I just want to honor your voice. It's so gentle and so sweet. To me, sweet as in not like, oh, that's sweet, but like sweet, like something that soothes. And I just want to thank you for being you today on the show with us.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
I hope you guys loved that. I so loved it. I am so excited to be sharing with you some new voices and new ideas that are more centered towards really bringing your ideas to life. If your idea is a business or a book or a podcast, I want to give you more resources like that. And that is exactly why I had Dallas on the show today. And we are going to be having some more guests that have things like this to offer you. And I realized after I ended the interview with Dallas, I totally forgot to ask her how you guys could connect with her. And so I wanted to make sure that you know that all of her links and all of that good stuff is right on the show notes page on my website, as well as right in the notes, of the podcast app that you're listening to. So let me just tell you really quick how you can connect with her on all of the good things. So her website is yourbookbreakthrough.com. And you can learn about her coaching program there. She also has a blog on daybydaymasterpiece.com, which is beautiful. And you can connect with her on Instagram at Dallas Woodburn Author. And you know what? If you really loved this episode and you really feel like you were able to have some great takeaways from Dallas, take a screenshot as you listen and share that with your friends and tag us both. Tag me at Kelly J. Covert, tag Dallas at Dallas Woodburn Author, because we would love to hear from you. And I cannot tell you enough, you guys, I cannot say it enough, how much it means to me when you share these episodes with your friends, because this is all about empowering women. This is about teaching women and encouraging women and inspiring women to listen to their inner voice, that voice of wisdom that they have inside of them, and to know they have what they need to be truly themselves, to write the book, to start the business, to start the podcast, to run the marathon. You guys, you have what you need. And when we can get that message out to more women, that just is going to make this world a better place. As always, I want to remind you, you matter. Your work in this world is listening to your inner voice and taking action on that. I believe that wholeheartedly. And if we are doing that individually and together, guess what? We are changing the world. Don't ever forget that you are worthy.